It turns out that the nervous system is extremely flexible, and so much so that it's able to reshuffle the brain cells such that it would alter their behavior and their function so that they would regulate the behavior. So let's talk about it. Study MIT scientists show that even simple animals can switch many gears in their brain to muster an adaptive response to deadly infectious diseases. MIT scientists fed infections into these worms. It turns out that these worms, like humans, change their behavior in order to combat this infection. For example, they ate less and they became more lethargic. So scientists discovered that the worm that was fed with these infectious diseases had totally revamped the role of several of its neurons and some of their peptides they secreted across the brain to modulate the behavior of the worm. So systems that responded to stress in one case or another became reconfigured to cope with to understand how the worms responded to infection. The MIT team tracked many features of the worm's behavior for days as the worms fought the infections and as the researchers made genetic manipulations to probe the underlying mechanisms at play. They also recorded the activity across the whole brains of these sick animals. This kind of comprehensive observation and experimentation is very difficult to achieve. The results showed that these worms repurposed and essentially reconfigured the functions of the neurons and the peptides to mount an adaptive response to infections versus a different problems like stress, for example. The results therefore shed light on what has been a tricky question to resolve. How do brains use their cells, circuits, and neuromodulations to deal with life at hand that it's being thrown at them? At least part of the answer seems to be the very fact that they reshuffle the existing components of the neurons rather than creating unique neurons for each situation. How do combinations of neuromodulation released from different neuronal resources control the diverse internal state that animals exhibit remains an open question, says the scientist. The state of stress and infection are not induced by unique sets of neuromodulators. Instead, one larger set of neuromodulators may be deployed from different sources and in different combination to specify these different internal states. The brain and the human body in general still remains an enigma because as we move forward, we learn more and more. And it is for this reason that science is needed, and we need a lot of support and help to continue with our scientific endeavor. Each study, although a baby step, is always a stepping stone to the next question in line that needs to be answered. And just because science needs to be extremely strict in terms of how we design research studies and how we collect data, how do we analyze it, and all those very rigorous path and protocols that we follow, as a result, it does become a little bit cumbersome and also a little bit slow to make these small yet mighty progress of the fact that the majority of the world really cares about different things. There are very few who not only care about scientific discoveries, but also dedicate their time and life to that. And that is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just that sometimes it breaks my heart, because if we did have more people who would join the scientific community and actually do the actual work and not just having opinions, because opinions are easy and frankly cheap to have, but to actually, you know, do the work and do the sacrifices and and all that, we would be much further along. And it is for that reason that I think these LLMs and in the future more established and elaborate AI tools such as AGI and or ASI would absolutely help us make much larger discoveries and faster discoveries in the scientific community than we are doing. Thing that I wanted to mention, and this purely comes from my heart, is that it is really hard to create a balanced life where you are in a position to do your scientific work to its depth that it's needed, but at the same time have a quote-unquote normal life or normal lifestyle. In the beginning, when you are just going through the education, you can't even have a normal life. You live off of very like the poverty level, at a poverty level, not to mention all the stress. And once you graduate, then it becomes a little bit different, because then you are able to land a job, but at the same time, you still do need to, for example, make sacrifices. That's why a lot of us work on weekends if we are not able to, work otherwise, have this as our sort of full-time job. And so it is, what I'm trying to say is that it's not as easy as it sounds. A lot of people, I think, have a lot of opinions, but opinions not backed by sacrifices at the scientific level, rigorous data, peer-reviewed papers, is just an opinion, in my opinion. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's good that everybody has opinions, but it's really nothing to back it up with unless you actually do the actual scientific work. And if you want to do the real scientific work, you do need to sacrifice. And that's just how it is, unfortunately. I mean, unless you're a millionaire or a billionaire, and then you don't need to think about those things, obviously. But then I'm not even sure if you were a millionaire or a billionaire, you would even be interested in doing scientific work. Maybe you would, I don't know. I would, definitely. There's always comes a point in your life where you have to make some decisions, and some of them are tough, and they do mean sacrifices and compromises and going through some hurdles in order to get there. And that's why it's a good thing that we have all these different types of personalities and people in the world, because not everybody wants the same thing. And I always thought that everybody would be extremely excited about, science, and especially neuroscience. But it turns out that the interest of most of these people is really at the sort of a shallow level. Is like, hey, let's just have a conversation, and then after that we're just going to walk away and do our own normal thing. But for those who are obsessed with a topic, any topic, not necessarily just science, is that we cannot let go. It's literally in our mind. Even though maybe we go to a dinner party, we're sitting and we're eating dinner with everybody, it's still in the back of our mind. And that's kind of where the obsession comes. It's very hard to shut it down. It's very hard to shut it off. That's what I'm trying to say. And so everybody has that type of I guess, obsession with something. It's just a matter of finding what you are obsessed about, and either honoring it or not honoring it. For those of us who have some type of obsession, whether it's science or anything else for that matter, anything in life, for some of us, it's really hard to shut it down. And that, I think that's where this dichotomy comes in, where you always feel like you have to make a choice. Just because you literally cannot shut it down. You literally cannot shut it off. You go to bed thinking about it, you wake up in the morning thinking about it, you eat your lunch thinking about it, and then of course you do your daily task. And then when you do your daily task, then you're focused on your daily task, of course. But as soon as that daily task is gone, let's say you're going to have lunch, then it just comes back on. It's like a light bulb that just comes back on. And so I think that's when it really becomes sort of a ongoing life choice, if you will. So these are all also, of course, a combination of philosophical and scientific questions that do come up. I don't know whether you think about it or not, but I certainly do. And that's also why, to some extent, I really like philosophy, because it sort of quenches that thirst you have in terms of thinking, especially for those of us who are obsessed with thinking. I'm obsessed with thinking and solving problems, whether it's in my daily task or my job or, my hobbies and whatnot. And that's also where all these philosophical questions, I think, mash up with scientific questions. And I think that's when all these questions in neuroscience, to some extent, become also extremely relevant to a lot of people, although they are not neuroscientists, is because it's just innate within us, this sort of philosophical way of thinking about life. At some point in our life, not always, but at some point in our life, it's a very innate feeling, and a lot of us have it. No matter how much money you have in this world, no matter how little money you have in this world, no matter who you are, at some point in life, I think everybody asks these philosophical questions. And I think that science, in my mind, especially neuroscience, is extremely well positioned to sort of quench that thirst that a lot of us feel, whether we admit it or not. Okay, well, that's all I have for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.